Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. We're going to be talking about uh, formulating a plan on getting employees back to work, and particularly to the workplace. And joining me as an expert in this space is Carrie Duarte, who's the Workforce of the Future leader for PwC and also sits on PwC's board of directors. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you, TK. Thanks for having me. Great to be here today.
So here we are in COVID, doing remotes, Zooming and doing all that. But now we're starting to see cities opening up, and boards and managements are in some pretty serious discussions about the challenges of bringing employees back into the office. So your team had authored a terrific white paper titled Reboot Getting Back to the Workplace. Probably one of the best resources that I've seen, sort of talking about the questions and issues. I know the boards are dealing with every issue, the who, what, where, when, why, of bringing employees back. And this is unprecedented, okay? The discussions are unprecedented because there's never sort of been this bizarre health and safety issue on trying to have people return. So, what advice would you give boards right now that are having these discussions about this, again, unprecedented challenge?
Yeah, it is unprecedented and such a challenge. And you said it well, health, safety, we're dealing with a health crisis, financial crisis, and in the US, a societal crisis. And so as boards are thinking about this, just like we approach so many topics from both a governance perspective and then our strategy perspective, similarly around return to workplace and it's return to workplace and recovery and resiliency as we work to come out of this series of crises. So maybe if we start with some of the governance and risk management around this, TK, would that be a good place to start there?
Well, you and I have talked about this a number of times now, and I like how you sort of break this down into two main areas or buckets, and risk management and corporate strategy. So let's talk about the risk management first. So
Okay.
review those issues and how somebody should be looking at that.
Okay, terrific, TK. So as we think about the risk management around this, we are all so focused on the health and safety of our workforce, first and foremost. And as organizations are coming up with the approaches to return to workplace, in addition to that, it's thinking around the risk management around enterprise risk management from legal exposure, as well as the operational risks and ensuring continued productivity. And so in some of these first stages of thinking around return to workplace, for many organizations, as we think about the enterprise risk management around this, how is your organization making the decisions about who, when, how comes back to the workplace? And what we're seeing is that it's not just a one-time decision. Every month, as and until we get a vaccine and things are more under control, it will be an ongoing decision. I think we're seeing that in Houston right now, where we see that they're starting to get concerned as things have opened up. People are heading back out of their homes, and now cases are increasing again. So, from a board perspective, how is our management team making those decisions? And I'll tell you, for example, one company I was talking with, my stomach dropped when they said, oh, well, our local offices, they know best on when to return to the workplace. And you say, oh my goodness, because how are they making that, how are they ensuring that from an enterprise risk perspective, is it made on a data-driven decision? How are you incorporating the health status in the area where your office or work site is? Right? And how are you incorporating the guidelines and regulations? Those are varying by state and sometimes by city as you make these decisions. So how are you incorporating that data? And then it always comes down to, and then documenting that. Because many are saying it's not if, but when a company has an issue, if someone comes to the office and gets sick, and God forbid, it becomes very serious for them or someone at home, to really help protect the health and safety of the workforce, as well as that enterprise risk management around if there is ever a legal issue. How are you making sure that it's data driven, demonstrating and documenting that it's health and safety first around this, so that decision around the return to workplace is one piece, and then I'll walk through two others that I'm finding to be really helpful from that risk management perspective. But on that, data-driven decision, one of the things that we always think about too is also how to do that in a tech-enabled way, because many organizations that I'm talking to, it is so manual, and the people that they have, tracking people going back to workplace and tracking how all the paperwork on who's coming back and how and when. One of the things that we've done as an organization, and I'm starting to see others do, is pulling that together in like a dashboard that has each of the locations where you have offices, and what is the health data, what are the regulations around the return to work in that area, and then thinking about the types of employees and how much do they really need to be in that office to get their work done and to be productive. That we're finding that varies by jurisdiction, both across the US and globally, and that's becoming really important and valuable for both protecting health and safety, managing productivity, and enterprise risk management. So I think that's number one. And then two others that we're finding to be effective, if we stick on this concept of how do we tech enable, the other thing that we have found is a contact tracing, and which can, and from a board perspective, is are we asking management how is management keeping an eye on if someone is infected, how is that managed throughout the organization? When COVID first evolved, we had the same thing where in our New York offices someone was infected, and then we had to quarantine thousands, a lot of people around this, because it was all done manually, right? And we were trying to check badges in and out of the office. But now what we've seen and what we've done is the concept of contact tracing. And what that does is enables an organization, if you know that someone has become infected, with contact tracing, you know who has been within a certain proximity and for how long. And that does two things. One, it can help give peace of mind to the other workers in the office, so that they know that they haven't been exposed to that person who may have been sick, and also helps to limit so that the company can, it's tech enabled, so it's automatic, and you have the whole list of who to reach out to let them know they may have been exposed. So it really gives peace of mind as well as protecting, and does it in a more automated way, because we're seeing so many people spend hours and hours. From a board perspective, how much time is being spent on this, and is it being done efficiently to get to the health and safety of the workforce? And then the third thing that we're finding from, again, a risk management perspective, enterprise, in terms of some of the legal exposure as well as health and safety, is there's the decision and data-driven decision on when to go back to the workplace. But once people are back, how are we ensuring that they are maintaining and consistent with the policies that we have? So part of that, again, is documenting what are our policies, how are we documenting that, and ensuring that that is being applied across whether the country or globally. And that also will be important if and when there is an incident that occurs. The company will then be able to document, well, we have had policies and we have a risk and controls framework to ensure that the policies are being complied with. So it's the decision to go back to work, putting some data-driven decision and documentation around that. Secondly, some contact tracing to protect and manage when and if there is an exposure. And then third, risk and controls to document that the company does have policies, and to document that the company is following up to help make sure that those policies and ways of working are complied with as we think about managing the risk around this.
It's just so complex. I mean, when you think about all the pieces and what has to be done, and particularly the attitudes of the employees right now, it just it's quite a challenge. So let's look at a brighter piece of this, which is your corporate strategy. So, you know, um, we can't forget that with every incident, whether it's good or bad, there are opportunities that are created. And even as unprecedented as COVID-19 is, it's still changing the landscape and creating opportunities. So, talk a little bit about corporate strategy and particularly from the board's view.
Thanks, TK. And that's where, through as we are thinking and moving from some of the tactical and the risk management, as we think about the strategy, trying to find some silver lining in this, and we're actually finding that there's quite a bit, and some real significant opportunity. So, what do we mean by that, and where are those opportunities? First is as we think about kind of the recovery and coming out of this, let's look at what's happened over the past 12, 14 weeks. So many companies that we are talking to are saying, we didn't think we were capable of doing what we just did, right? In terms of so many organizations have people, a distributed workforce now, working virtually and remotely, and they haven't had the loss of productivity that they thought they might have. They also had speed of decision making. They never thought that they could make such decisions and, execute upon it so quickly. And so, one of the first things that, from a strategy perspective, is what has happened over the past months and weeks that you want to make sure that you don't lose, right? And some of it is ways of working, right? Some of it is some of the culture in an organization. Some is the ability to decision make. Um, Being really intentional around what are those things and how do we make sure we don't lose that going forward. Some of the other strategic opportunities are around thinking about, coming out of this, how do we recreate demand? Many companies are in really tough financial situations. And so, where are the new opportunities for demand and revenue generation and accelerating a lot of the e commerce opportunities? We're finding companies that really are focused on that because they're seeing they can actually do more digitally and from an e commerce perspective than they expected. So, how and if are you doubling down on that? As we think about the employees who are now working remotely, I can't even tell you how many organizations, including our own, are saying this works really well, right? And how do we think about, we did the past couple of months without much planning and look at where we are. We don't expect to be able to maintain this level of productivity. There was a crisis, and that was really motivating for our people, our organization to come together. Can we continue to have a much larger remote working population without losing productivity? What does that look like? What would we need to do to encourage that, both from when we say ways of working, it's how do we ensure communications, connectivity, remote and virtual coaching, things like that in terms of ways of working to maintain connectivity and how to lead a virtual team in a distributed workforce. And what's also resulting is that some organizations are saying that there's a meaningful ongoing real estate savings opportunity because while people would have automatically been full time in the workplace in the past, now they're finding that a lot of their workforce maybe only needs to come to the workplace 1 or 2 days a week, right, on a sustained basis. And some are saying some of their workers don't need to come in at all. So, how are you thinking about coming out of this in terms of the return to workplace decision? Based on the type of employee, how much does that person really need to be in the office and for what reasons? And then how do we tech enable that to make that sustainable? And we're finding that a lot of companies are saying that that can lead to some meaningful real estate savings, but also really further their talent strategy because the best talent can work from wherever they want to work. And what an amazing opportunity. So there are so many opportunities from a strategy perspective, and I know we want to keep this to a shorter time frame. Maybe just a couple more quick things that I think are so critical coming out of this. We talk about the health crisis, we talk about the financial crisis. There's also the societal crisis, right? And so coming out of this, so many organizations are looking to make real action and change from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And so the way in which companies are thinking from a strategy perspective around revenue generation for their workforce, maybe working from home, how are they really making change and making it inclusive in how they structure the recovery through this? And there's strategy pieces and there's tactical things to really drive those changes. And then finally, as we think about, again, that remote workforce, what are some of the things that we can do to really help from that productivity, not just the ways of working, but the emotional, mental well-being coming out of this. So many folks in our workforce, we've come together around this crisis and it's starting to wear. So from a board perspective, how are we talking to management about the health and well-being of the workforce? How are we supporting them? Do we have an understanding of the sentiment of the workforce and whether they want to come back to the workplace or not, and weaving that in to the whole strategy as we come out of this and look to recovery will be so critical for the success, continued productivity, and for the ongoing kind of strategy and success of the organization. So those are a few areas. There's so much more around this, but it's really looking for that silver lining as we think about the workforce, the workplace, and enabling technologies, the cybersecurity that goes into work from home, and then the corporate strategy around revenue generation and efficient operations.
So, Carrie, that's great insight, and there's just so much to absorb if you're sitting there, going through this. So, where can people tap the resources for your group, the workforce of the future, and some of the stuff that's in the governance center? Where can they go to get further information?
Well, thanks, TK. Definitely on pwc.com, you can have access to this reboot document that we hope is really helpful. And it gives an overview of some of the structure here with some click-throughs if you want to dive deeper. As well as at pwc.com under COVID, we have several different surveys where we're gathering data around, there's a CFO survey, there's an employee sentiment survey, and a worker survey. So we hope that information is really helpful. Please call. My contact information is there, as well as those of my colleagues who can be helpful, as in if you have questions navigating this.
Well, I'm really interested in the worker research, so we may have to have you back again and take a look at that and see if we can't dig a little deeper into that. But I wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, TK. Great to be here. We appreciate it.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.